Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about family history focus. Now that may not be important to some of you, but for some of us who are a little bit more linear in our thinking, who need checklists and to-dos, this is a really hopeful topic, because one of the things that we discover is that when new people come into family history, they get so excited about the discovery process. You see those little shaky leaves and you just want to follow them and see where they go. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a way to generate some excitement. It's a way new people are drawn in. But once you've chased down all of those leaves, or once you've hit a point where you realize that just copying information from other people's trees may not be entirely accurate, you want to start doing some actual genealogy research into the records that are available to help document some of those stories and family trees. Now, I've been kicking around an analogy, and I've been on vacation for the last week, and so I've kind of been mulling it over in my head, and I don't know if it's going to fly or not, so stick with me. I was thinking back to when I was a teenager, and I decided I wanted to take piano lessons. That was a little bit late to get started, but I just wanted some basic skill. I had learned a little bit how to read music because of my singing, but I wanted to be able to play a few songs on the piano. And I still remember sitting down and trying to play that first song. It was painful. It was slow. I made mistakes. Nobody wanted to listen to that, but I kept at it, and I kept at it, and I kept at it. And one of the things that I discovered was every time I sat down to play that one song, I played it a little bit faster. I made a little fewer mistakes each time, and I got better and better. And so now I can play that song. Now, it's been a while since I've played the piano. I imagine if I was to sit back down today and do that, I wouldn't have to start back at the beginning, but I probably would have to play it a little bit slow, and I might make a few mistakes that first time or two through before that muscle memory kicked in and I remembered what I was doing. So genealogy research is much like any other skill. When you first get started, it can be slow and painful. You will make mistakes, but that's okay. One of the things that I'm here to encourage you about is that as you practice and persist, you're going to get better at this. It's going to get to a point where it becomes muscle memory, where you just enjoy doing it. But you have to do it right, because if you just sit down and try to bang something out on the keyboard without any knowledge of the skill behind it, it's going to be a little bit painful for others to listen to, no matter how much fun you're having. Okay, like I said, I don't know if that analogy holds entirely true with genealogy, but that's what I've been kind of kicking around in my head lately. And so today what I'm going to share with you are some really specific skills that genealogists use to grow their family trees. And hopefully you can take them for where you're at in your research and apply one or all of these tips to help you get a little bit better and make fewer mistakes as you go. So with that introduction, let's go ahead and dive in. Some of this information is kind of review. If you've been with me before, this isn't new information. We've talked about it before. And so I want to just make sure that sometimes repetition gives us the best information. So here is my philosophy when it comes to how I approach my family history. Have a big focus and a small goal. And that big focus doesn't mean complete my entire family tree, right? But it does need to be a little bit more broad than find the parents of my grandfather. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. I'll give you an example or two. But I want to just first walk you through my process. So I have a big focus, and I have small goals underneath that focus. And then for each of those small goals, there's actually a series of questions that I ask myself. Like I said, if you've been with me for a while, these are not new, but the review is good for all of us. The first question I ask is, what do I already know? The next question I ask is, how do I know it? Those two questions go together, right? Because sometimes we think we know something, but when we start asking ourselves, well, how do I know it? The how do I know it weakens what we might know, right? If you know something about an ancestor of yours simply because you copied it from someone else's family tree, that's not a very strong argument. If you know something because your grandmother told you, also, surprisingly maybe to some of you, not a terribly strong argument. If you know it because you've documented it with 6 different types of records, and those records have been fairly consistent, or you can explain the inconsistencies, then maybe what you know is pretty solid information or pretty close to the truth. So what do you already know? How do you know it? I go through this process not just with each person on my tree, but with each piece of information: name spellings, birth dates, birth locations, spouses' names, children's names, marriage locations and dates. I mean, any piece of information in my tree, I'm going through this process. Now, I've gotten to the point where I do a lot of this in my head, or I just type it into the notes for a person. But I do go through this process, because if I'm not asking myself this question or these questions, then I may be chasing up the wrong branch of a tree. I might be looking at people who aren't even my relatives. And so I do this pretty methodically. Then the next question, when you're thinking about this goal that you have, or how you're trying to focus on a specific person in your tree, is, what do you want to know? That becomes a really important question. Very often I get emails from people who say, I want my family history. Can you give me my family history? Well, that's a little broad, right? But sometimes I'll get emails from people that are really specific, and I love that. I am looking for the parents of James Smith. I know that he was born here in this time and place because of these records. What can you do to help me find his parents? That's a really specific question. You're looking for what you want to know. And then the next question that kind of goes in tandem with that is, where could you find that information? And so I'll start brainstorming. Now, again, this is a skill that I've developed, so I do a lot of this in my head. Sometimes I just take down notes and put it into my family tree maker so that I can keep myself on track, and I'll show you how I do that here in just a minute. But I know what records are available because I spend a lot of time with the records. And so I start thinking about census records when they were a child, a death record that might list parents' names, a birth record, if it exists, that might list parents' names, a christening record in a church, an obituary. And I run through all of those records very quickly in my head and create kind of a list so that I know what possible records I am looking for that would help me answer the specific question I've asked. So here's what that looks like. This is, again, an example I've used before, but I think it's worth the review. Here's an example of a big focus and a small goal in my own research. So my big focus right now is to document all the descendants of Daniel Shipman. He immigrated to New Jersey in the 1730s. He's what we call a gateway ancestor. So he is an immigrant ancestor of mine. And he also fought in the Revolutionary War. And so he came as a young teenager into New Jersey, and then fought as an old man, and a few of his children fought as well. And I want to document all of his descendants, just because that's where my focus is. I want to connect with other people who might be researching him as well, so that we can take it back another generation or two. There are a lot of myths and stories surrounding his parentage, where he originally came from, what the last name originally was, and if I can connect with other researchers who might be looking into him as well, maybe together we can take that family back another couple of generations. Plus, I just have this huge curiosity about descendancy research. I love looking at a person and some of the choices that they made that put them in a specific place and time, and then looking what happens to their descendants and where they end up, and the various religious choices they make, and the political choices that they make, and the lifestyle choices that they make that lead them wherever they may be. And so descendancy research, I get a real kick out of it, and so I have a couple of projects going on with that, but this is a focus of mine. Now, a small goal around that focus, okay, this man here, Albert Jefferson Kerr, is the husband of one of the descendants of Daniel Shipman. Here's what I know about him, and here are the list of records that I might find more information in. And so here's what I know, and what I would like to discover is more about him and his family. So that's how I do that. Big focus, small goal. Maybe your big focus is, that you want to document 4 generations of your father's family history. Maybe your big focus is that you want to find your mother's immigrant ancestor. Maybe you want to locate a Revolutionary War soldier in your family so that you can join the sons or daughters of the American Revolution. Whatever your big focus is, have one. I think it gives you a little bit of purpose. It gives you a little bit of drive. It gives you some motivation. When you sit down to work on your family history, you don't have to say, where will I start today? Because you know what you're doing. And then have a specific goal. In some cases, I may have 3 or 4 small goals underneath my large focus. I do that because I get bored easily. And so for me, it's a way if I'm beating my head up against a wall, or if I'm sick of Arkansas records, or whatever the case may be, I can just bookmark this and make some notes, and I'll show you how to do that here in just a minute, and then move on to the next small goal in this same focus. So sometimes I may be working on 2 or 3 things simultaneously under a big focus, but that focus still remains the same. And it helps guide my research, and it helps keep me moving forward, and it helps keep me engaged. As much as I love genealogy, and believe me, I love genealogy, sometimes I just need sometimes I need a little bit of a push to say, you know what, here, work on this. And this helps do that for me. So I'm going to talk about research questions here for just a minute, because I want you to start thinking about formulating your own. If this isn't something that you've done, it's a really, really useful exercise to just articulate, whether verbally or written, and I would encourage written, to articulate what it is that you're working on, what it is that you're looking for. There is a new book out. I may have mentioned it before. It's called Mastering Genealogical Proof. It's by Dr. Tom Jones. That book is quickly becoming the go-to resource for family history research. And I have spent quite a bit of time. I'm on my second read-through of it. There's a lot of information in there to absorb. But on page 8 of that book, Dr. Jones talks about research questions specifically and the different kinds of research questions that exist. And this was a little bit eye-opening to me, because a lot of my research questions tend to revolve around just a very narrow set of ideas. And so this kind of opened my mind a little bit. The first category of research questions he lists are relationship questions. So for example, who were the parents of Albert Jefferson Kerr? Or who are all of the children of Daniel Jones and his first wife? Or who, like a very specific question about a relationship. And family history, after all, is mostly about relationships, how people are connected, who's connected to whom, if they really are connected. One of the things that I've discovered lately is that a lot of times, and I fall victim to this too, I'll look at a list of people in my family tree. I inherited a lot of my genealogy, and am still in the process of cleaning a lot of that up. But I'll look at a list of people and I'll realize this guy had 2 wives, and those wives were both having children at the same time. And I don't think he was a bigamist. I think what's happened is we've got 2 men with the same name who've been somehow merged together as if they were one person. And really, there's 2 men with the same name who are having families near one another. They may be cousins, first, second, third cousins. They may have no relationship at all. But that concept of identity is really important. And so just because somebody has the same name, even if that person is living in the same location, born about the same time period, those identity questions become really important. A lot of times our records that we're working with don't have complete information. So in this case, there's some information listed on tax rolls in Missouri, but it's only listed by first initial. Now, A could be Albert, or it could be Andrew, or it could be any number of things. We don't just assume that because it's the right initial or even the right name in the right place at the right time that it's our person. So sometimes we have to ask really specific identity questions that help us sort out whether or not we've actually been tracing the correct person. Is this my person? And sometimes those identity questions bleed into some of these relationship questions, if you know that your grandfather's name was Daniel Lathrop Shipman, then that's great because you have a really specific name. But if he's only ever listed in records as Daniel, and there are two Daniels with wives named Susan, how do you know which one is yours? So those kinds of questions you have to start asking about relationships and about identities. And then the third question that Dr. Jones, the third way that Dr. Jones categorizes research questions is by activity. And again, all three of these types of questions help us sometimes answer some of those other questions. So when you start looking at the types of activities that your ancestors engaged in, military service being one of those, that will help you differentiate between people who have the same name, which will then help you differentiate the relationships in their lives. Other types of activity questions might revolve around occupations, right? What was my grandfather's occupation? That, if you can discern or figure out what that is, then you can tell him apart from, you can tell your grandfather, the blacksmith, apart from, the other man with the same name who was always a farmer, or who, was a horse trader or whatever, right? So activity, identity, and relationship, according to Dr. Jones, are the three different categories of research questions that we can be formulating. And those, the more specific we can be, and I've had to be a little bit brief just because of space here on my slide, but the more specific we can be about those questions, the more likely we are, A, to have success in our research, to actually be able to focus and get to the records that we need to get to, and B, the more likely we are to be tracing the right people. Make sure we have the right family, that we're building a family tree that's really ours. Now, I'm just going to run through a couple of slides here really quickly just as a review, just some quick tips, and then the last few minutes we'll talk about some of the tools available to keep some of this focus. So one of the things that I find is that when we start diving into answering some of those research questions and we find that we're hitting a brick wall, it's oftentimes because we haven't done the work we needed to do in the previous generation. So if you've got your great-grandfather's name and you're trying to find out more information about him and his parents, maybe you need to back up a generation and look at your grandfather. What do you know about him and his siblings and the family that he was raised in? Have you collected all the information about this family, not just one census record or one obituary for your grandfather, but what about all the census records for the family? What about death records and obituaries for all of the siblings that might help clear up some of the misconceptions or inconsistencies that creep into records by nature of the beast? And then, have you collected information about all the members of this family? Those two questions really go together. So back up a generation, review everything you know, and then try to move forward again. Sometimes the reason we can't move forward is because we haven't collected everything we possibly could about that previous generation. The next tip, and again, I've shared this before, but it's worth repeating, create timelines. One of the ways that I do that is with the actual records themselves, where I put in the notes of the person information about their lives. You can include important dates in history if you need those. Create yourself a cheat sheet so that you know when different wars occurred. I've got a list of wars. I actually just copied it straight out of our wiki, the Ancestry wiki under the Learning Center, so that I can look at that and tell what potential service opportunities, military service opportunities, there may have been as I'm going through my family tree. Create dates about, maybe major catastrophic things that happened, the 1918 influenza epidemic, earthquakes, famines, anything that would have affected why people migrated or moved, anything like that you think that comes up as you do your research. Maybe create kind of a master timeline so that you can use that to refer to as you do other research. Also, always make note of the records you found. I hope you're attaching records, whether it's through Family Tree Maker or your online tree. But one of the things I've talked about before and that I feel really strongly about is this idea of transcribing records as well. It helps you pay more attention to the details. It helps you note inconsistencies in records. You know, if one record says that the man was born in Georgia and one says Alabama and one says Mississippi, I want to have that all laid out for me so that I can start to reconcile some of those inconsistencies, and so that I'm not creating brick walls for myself because I just plugged in Alabama into his birthplace. If I've made notes about that, then it's really clear and laid out for me when I start researching, or when I get back to researching that person. And then also make notes of the records you still have to locate. So here's what that looks like in my family tree. Here is my great-grandfather, Albert Jefferson Kerr, and here are the notes that I have for him. And most of you are going to see that these look exactly the same as they did the last time I showed them to you, and that's because I haven't had a lot of time to work on my own genealogy. But here's how I do this, right? So I found the 1910 census, and I just transcribed the information right out of that census, and I made sure that I captured every piece of information. I've done that same thing for the 1920 census and the 1930 census. And now I can just glance here. He's living in Oklahoma here. He's living in Arkansas. He's living in Arkansas in a different county. He ages 10 years between these two censuses and 11 years between these two censuses. So maybe I want to go back and look at the dates of those censuses and see when during the year he was born compared to when the census was taken. His birthplace is listed consistently as Missouri. His parents' birthplaces are not listed consistently. 20 and 30 say his father was born in Illinois and his mother born in Missouri. The 1910 census lists his parents both born in Missouri. Might be something I need to look into a little bit more. So that's one of the reasons why I transcribe information out of the censuses, so that I can at a glance just compare that information. But the other reason is because it forces me to pay attention to the details. Then in between, you'll notice this is in chronological order here down the left-hand side, I put information that I need to still look for. I still need to locate them in the 1940 census, and probably they're going to be living in Arkansas. I need to locate a World War I draft card for him. He was of the right age, and I know it should exist, and maybe it'll be in Oklahoma, or maybe it'll be in Arkansas. This place in Arkansas is in the northwest corner of Arkansas, right across the border from Missouri, so maybe it'll be there. So I've just made some notes about the specific record I need to go look for, so that the next time I have a few minutes, I can just come right here and I know exactly what it is that I'm looking for. I don't have to think about it or waste time reviewing everything because I've already made that note to myself. So that's one of the ways that I use the tools available to me to keep myself focused and like I said, to save some time too, so that I can just dive right into research the next time I have a few minutes. I don't have to waste time reviewing everything and trying to figure out now what is it that I need to do, because I've essentially created a to-do list for myself right here. Again, that's in the notes. I use the notes in Family Tree Maker pretty extensively. When you're looking at this person panel, there's a little notepad. You just click on that, and then it's this very first icon, person note, that pops that up. Just as an FYI, if you're syncing your family tree from Family Tree Maker to your online tree at Ancestry.com, those notes do sync. They actually end up, if I'm looking at a tree here, they actually do end up in your family tree. So I can come in here and I can look at this person, and the notes are going to be right here where it says View Note. However, and this is an important thing to know, those notes are only viewable to me as the owner of this tree. So even though my tree is public, nobody else can see my research notes. I can choose to copy and paste these into a Smart Story or create a PDF out of them or a Word doc out of them if I want. And maybe I'll do that once I'm done with the research on this particular individual. But those notes, they are synced, but then they're not viewable to anybody but the tree owner. That's an important thing to know. So that's how I create individual timelines. That's how I keep track of what records I still need to work with, again, so that I've got focus and that I can dive into research the next time. Now let's just talk about a couple other tools available to you to help keep you focused. Some of them are really handy. The first thing, and this may seem silly to some of you, but if you've set your goal, your big focus, Do it around a purpose. Let me give you an example. If your parents have a 60th anniversary coming up, maybe what you want to do is to have a complete 5-generation pedigree chart available as a gift for them for that anniversary. That is a goal that you've set, or a big focus here around a specific purpose. I find that when I have a time-bound purpose, it keeps me more motivated and it keeps me more focused. It's a lot more difficult to get distracted if I know, I've got this event coming up in 6 months and I really need to focus on this and not trail off. Okay, and so set your goal around a purpose, an anniversary, a wedding gift, a family reunion, something, and it will help keep you focused, I promise. And then one of the things you might want to do is actually create, type that up on a piece of paper and, stick a picture of your parents' smiling face on that piece of paper and tack it up, on the corkboard by your computer where you work, or tape it on the wall next to your desk so that it's there, so that it just reminds you that that's what you're working towards. Another one of the tools available, and this one is available in Family Tree Maker, is the Bookmark feature. And I use this quite a bit. Basically what it does is it allows me, when I'm working with somebody in my tree, I can right-click on them and I have this option to add a bookmark. And what that does is it just tags that person so that I can then come here to my bookmarks, and now here are the people that I've been working with in my tree. So I can say, oh, well, I was last working with, this person, and so that's where I'm going to start next, is I'm going to keep focusing here. Now you can come over here and you can see my notes. I've got quite a bit of information that I've found on her. It looks like it's all censuses with the exception of a marriage record. So probably what I'm going to be looking for next is going to be additional census records and then a death record. I could come in here and make that note to myself, or as you noticed, I just made that assessment that quickly because I already had all of these notes here. So this bookmark feature, and then if you're done with that person, or when you're ready to move on to something, you can delete that bookmark. You'll notice it removes her from the list over here. And then maybe next I need to work on her husband, and so I can right click on him and add bookmark, and it adds it over here. So that's how I use the bookmark feature in Family Tree Maker, again, because I have a lot of people in my family tree, and I need to be able to focus on a small subset of them that I'm working on. Now, I try not to let this list ever get longer than about 20 people. Like I said, I have a little bit of a short attention span, and so I try to give myself 3 or 4 different avenues at least to work on, and sometimes that grows. Some of these, it's because I forgot to remove the bookmark when I was done researching, but it certainly is an available tool for you, and hopefully you'll play with that and figure out how it can work for you. There's also a to-do list feature, and it exists in both Family Tree Maker and on Ancestry.com. I'll show first in Family Tree Maker. There's a couple of ways to do this. I can come in here for a specific person, and on any person there's this little tasks icon over here on the far right. I can click on that, and I can actually create a new task specific for this person. So I can add information about I need to locate a death record for Perry. I expect that it will be in Arkansas, and I think it'll be around 1973. Looking at that, I should probably also check the Fayetteville newspaper for an obituary, and so I can make a note of that. I can categorize that if I want to create categories, and the categories can be used based on repository. So for example, if you know that Fayetteville's not a great example because their newspaper's online, but for example, if I knew that I needed to look up a bunch of obituaries in a newspaper that wasn't available online, I could create a category of the Springdale Public Library, and the next time I'm there, all I have to do is pull up all the tasks associated with that category, and I've now got a list of people that I need to be looking for while I'm in that library or at that location. So you can create whatever categories you want here so that you can start to do some of that research or keep that to-do list for yourself. That's how I use these particular categories. I use them specifically around offline records that I need to locate when I'm at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, or when I'm at a local courthouse or a local library where some of my ancestors lived. And so I'll create these little to-do lists around categories based on record repositories. If it's just going to be specific like online research that I'm going to do, then of course, like I showed you earlier, I usually just keep that information in the notes so that I know what I need to be looking for online. So that to-do list or that task list, and then it shows up over here in your plan. It's going to show up here, is where you're going to find those tasks. Now in your online tree, it's going to show up in a little bit of a different place. The to-do list is actually one of the widgets, that's what we call them, on the home page. Mine I've placed over here on the right-hand side, kind of towards the bottom. It says my to-do list. I can add an item here, okay? If you do not see this to-do list widget on your home page, you can customize your home page, and you should see it over here, and you can then highlight it and add it to the home page. You also have the option in customizing your homepage to move that up or down on the page. So if I can bump this right up to the top so that when I come to Ancestry.com, I have my to-do list right here in my face on the homepage. First thing, what I need to do is continue the 1940 browse of Hickory, Carroll County, Arkansas with enumeration district 813, and I was on image 23, right? So I've created a to-do list item because I was going image by image through this particular town, mostly because I'm related to the whole town, and I wanted to make sure that I caught everybody in that. And so I was going image by image, and that's where I ended or where I was interrupted. I just created a quick to-do list item so that when I come back to Ancestry.com and have a minute to work on my own research, I know right where to pick up. So again, that to-do list is going to be on your home page, or you can do custom. You can create any to-do tasks here in Family Tree Maker, or you can create them at a person level using this tasks button. Really, really useful features available. Again, you don't have to use all of them. You don't have to use them the way that I use them. I've just shown you what's available so that hopefully you can figure out what works for you to help keep you focused. If you don't want to be focused, that's fine too. Some people just enjoy the thrill of discovery. I certainly have those moments where I just, something catches my interest. I come across a newspaper article about a fishing boat off the coast of New Jersey, and all of a sudden I want to learn more about the people who are engaged in that work and who else in the town I might be related to. I do that kind of research as well. If something catches my interest, that's part of the fun of family history. But for me, the real joy of family history comes in making sure that I'm climbing the right tree, and in having some kind of a goal, and being able to present a book to my family, being able to hang a chart on a wall, being able to share a story at a family reunion, because I've taken the time to really dive deep into researching some of these very specific people in my family tree. Well, I think we are over time today, but I hope that was a useful topic for you. If you have suggestions for other topics you'd like to see addressed, you can email at ask@ancestry.com with your suggestions or research questions. I look at those, and then that's how I craft these shows, and also uses those emails to craft our articles for our monthly update newsletter. So pay attention for those and send in your questions and suggestions if you have them. We also have a YouTube channel, and hopefully you'll check that out. We've been doing these videos now for, over a year and a half now. And so there are hundreds of them available on our YouTube channel that just may cover a topic that you might have missed. You might want to go take a look at that. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.